I think one of the big problems in the world is the lack of productive, effective debate that actually reaches conclusions. And that is one of the major things that critical fallibilism can help with ideas like using decisive arguments instead of indecisive arguments that are based on weighted factors. So let's talk a bit about what the world would be like with more effective debate. What would change? What would some of the consequences be? There are ongoing debates on things like what causes heart attacks that are unsettled. If we could reach better conclusions about those issues, that would save a lot of lives. There are people who do cancer research, and there's disagreement about which research areas are the most productive, the best places to use resources. And a lot of what happens is people disagree and then they each go do their own thing, rather than managing to debate which approaches are worth doing right now and reach some agreed on conclusions about that. So some people are pursuing research avenues that are unpromising, while other people know it's unpromising and they know why, and they could win a debate, but the debate isn't happening. People debate what kind of diet you should have, like vegan or keto, carnivore, or something more in the middle. Should you eat lots of grains and processed foods? Maybe they're totally fine and maybe they're really harmful. And this stuff is not getting resolved, it's not getting settled. Most people eat a lot of processed foods and grains and stuff. There's a lot of mainstream stuff saying that's fine. There isn't any kind of conclusive debate between them and some of the alternatives that's actually resolving anything. And there's no way to debate the mainstream. You can debate individuals, maybe. Like, most people aren't very open to debate, but even if you manage to debate an individual, he's not the leader of the mainstream. Even if you win and you change his mind, most mainstream people are going to just say, well, that guy lost a debate. It doesn't mean my position is wrong. They're not going to accept his debate performance as a proxy for the debate performance of themselves or of, like, mainstream experts in general. They're just like, well, there's plenty of other experts who wouldn't have lost that debate. They will claim, without naming names, that are actually willing to debate, often without naming names at all. There are, of course, many, many, many political controversies, and there are some attempts to debate these, but they're usually not very successful. Another example that I read about recently was in a game review, and it was saying how the game was kind of cluttered. It had too many features, most of which aren't that useful, and he thought that the game was made by a lot of people. It's a large budget game, and that they coded in a kind of defensive way where, like, each team was like, well, we think this is cool, so we're going to make it and put it in the game. And there was no central authority or effective debate to decide what should be in the game. There was no coherent overall vision. There's basically two ways that you can get a vision for the game that makes sense, rather than a bunch of different groups adding their own things that don't cohere well. And so the two ways are, like, one, you can have a leader, a central authority, and if the entire game follows that one guy's vision, then you're going to get a coherent game, rather than it following 8 different people's visions in 8 different ways. And then option number 2, besides a single dictator, is to have effective debate, where the people on the different teams actually talk with each other about what's good and why, and change each other's minds and get on the same page. And that did not happen. And just in general, in any large business, you have all these different people, and if you could get them to actually effectively debate what they think is good for the company and what the company should be doing, it could increase coordination between different departments in the company, get them more on the same page, more doing compatible things. And it could avoid some errors, because sometimes some guy who's not working in a department understands some error of that department. So there's so many opportunities throughout the world where debate is not properly happening, but if it could happen and be effective and reach conclusions, things would get a lot better. That's not just for science and academia and the kinds of things people usually think of as debate subjects. It's also just like every single large company, and even small companies would benefit a lot if, like, one, the leadership could be corrected by other people in the company who have less authority. When they're actually right, if their corrections could reach the leadership, that would be really beneficial. And also, if there was more effective debate, it would get people more on the same page. Like, even if the leadership is right about everything, getting the rank and file to actually see why they're right and agree and be persuaded would make them happier, more productive workers. A lot of mistakes happen because they don't actually understand the reasoning and perspective of leadership. So they do things, even if they're trying to like follow orders, they don't always know exactly what leadership would prefer they do. Also, lots of leadership in companies is the wrong people, they're dumb. And if you had effective debates, you could put the people who win most of the debates in charge of most of the stuff and probably make a lot more money. You could find people who are more suited to be the decision makers by seeing who is able to win debates and have ideas that actually stand up to criticism. Of course, it has to be rational debates, not using a bunch of rhetoric and charisma and appeals to emotion and whatever to get people to say they agree, or even just using social pressure. You know, there's lots of irrational things people do in debates. And what I'm talking about in envisioning a better world involves rational debate actually working well. Debates where there are a lot of mechanisms that make true ideas have an advantage. So it's not a guarantee that the truth always wins, but the debates should have a large bias in favor of the truth. There should be multiple things about how you're debating that give true ideas an advantage. Such as, true ideas have an advantage at standing up to criticism. It's harder to think of criticisms that seem true of ideas that are actually correct. Whereas if an idea is actually wrong in some way, it's easier to find a criticism because there actually is a flaw that you can point out. Another way productive debate would really help people, that is not going to be the first thing they think of when they're thinking about debating ideas and figuring out what's true. That sounds more like an intellectual activity that scientists need to do and maybe philosophers and stuff. So besides business, another application is friendships and relationships. People fight with their friends and their family quite a bit. And if instead of fighting, they could debate what is correct and then agree on it, they'd be much better off. It would reduce fighting a lot if they could communicate effectively about their disagreements and reach agreements about what the right answer is. And then people could actually change their minds and be happy to agree with this new idea and see it as better than their old idea. So there are a bunch of reasons that people are pessimistic about debate, including empirically, most debates don't work very well. They tend not to be very rational or effective. Even when people concede, they often revert back to their old view a bit later. The changing their mind often doesn't stick and last. Or even if they stay like intellectually persuaded and that they remember that over time, they often don't change their habits and they keep doing a lot of the same actions in their life. Even if they change their mind in an abstract way, it doesn't always lead to different behaviors, and so they often don't get much value out of these new ideas because they don't actually affect their lives. And people find a lot of debates end up being a waste of time. People are unreasonable, they argue in bad faith, they make low quality arguments. And the people who are complaining about this, they're often right that a lot of the stuff they think is low quality is in fact low quality, but then they also do a bunch of low quality stuff themselves that they don't realize. Because suppose that people, just a bunch of people who are like fairly smart, can recognize, say, 50% of low quality things, then they will avoid almost all of the 50% of low quality things that they're good at recognizing. Like, they're not going to do many of the things that they see are bad. So they'll think that they're really high quality because they only see a few of their own mistakes. But then other people will do a different set of mistakes. So person A, say there are 100 mistakes. Person A knows about numbers 1 through 50 and mostly avoids those, but makes a lot of mistakes in the 51 to 100 range. But then he meets person B, and person B is good at avoiding mistakes number 26 through 75. So they're equally good. They both avoid around half the mistakes. However, person A is going to make a bunch of mistakes that are obvious to person B, and vice versa. So I think a lot of that happens, and it causes people to overestimate their skill, because they make few mistakes that they know about, but then they make a bunch of mistakes that other people see, and you got everyone thinks the other guy is dumb because he makes a bunch of obvious mistakes, but I don't make a bunch of obvious mistakes. Because which mistakes are obvious to them varies by person. And a lot of people, of the smarter people who are more open to debate or something, tried debating in the past a bunch of times, and they found that it didn't work out too well. So a lot of people used to debate more and stopped. So if you look at like scientists and academics and intellectuals, a lot of them are not open to debate, but a lot of them did try to debate more at some time in the past, like in college. They didn't just go into their profession never wanting to debate anyone. They made some sort of attempt in the past and it didn't work out and they stopped doing it as much. I think that's a common story. So critical fallibilism, my philosophy, has ideas about how to help with this, how to improve debate. There are a bunch of different ideas, and some of them are more standard than others and less original. So things like more clarity and precision and using words better can help with debate. That is not an especially original idea. Other people have had that idea and they've tried it and it hasn't solved the problem. And I think part of why this is hard is there are a bunch of problems, so if you just solve one or two of them, your debates still aren't going to be very good. And then also, there are a couple problems that basically no one has fixed, that CF has an original idea about what this problem is and why it's a problem and how to solve it. And so other people, when they try solving all the other things, it's still not going to work because they've missed this one key idea. So another example of a thing other people have already tried, besides clarity, precision, and better wording, is organization. People have tried things like outlines and even debate tree diagrams of some sort. And another idea that I've pushed is having written debate methodology or policies, even like a flowchart of what actions should be taken in the debate. And that is less common and less widespread, but it is similar to the idea of the rule of law. It's not a super original idea. And stuff like having methods and policies, there are a lot of other contexts where people do that. There's a TV show called The Prophet, where this rich guy goes around to businesses and he gives them some money or buys a ownership share or something and then tries to fix the business. And one of the big things he talks about on this mainstream popular TV show is process. He wants the business to have a repeatable process. Like he went to I think it was a bakery and they made like cakes and stuff. And the owner is a good cook and they were able to make good cakes and whatever. And what he wanted from them was write down the recipes for all the things you make. Like your cakes are good, but they're not repeatable. We can't have anyone else bake them right now. And we need you to get them all in writing. And then it'll have two results. Like one, we can now delegate and let other people bake the same cake you would have baked with the same recipe. And two, you can get more consistency. You can have less variation from day to day, and customers are going to like that. They don't want to try a cake and they like it and they come back the next day and it's a bit different and they don't like it as much. Also, if you have consistency, then you can better calculate your cost of materials because you're always putting the same ingredients in. Then your cost for the materials for the cake is always the same, so you can better figure out what you should price it at. Anyway, the idea of following consistent processes, or of writing them down in advance, are pretty well known in some contexts. So again, useful things that can make debate better, but definitely not a full solution. People have tried stuff like that, and it's not good enough to solve why debate is unproductive. Another idea I've had is don't do stage debates, and don't do real-time debates, and don't do debates in voice. Instead, debate in writing, and spread the debate out over days or even weeks so people have time to think over what they're saying, and even to read sources that the other guy cites. And that, again, improves debate, but has been tried and it's not enough. And you can take all these little things that improve debate, and you might think, well, if we get like 10 of them, we're going to fix debate. And I think even that won't work. Even if you got like 10 nice things, it's still not going to improve debate. They're all important, and screwing them up can make debate ineffective, but fixing them all is not enough. So what is needed is CF's original idea of decisive arguments. Instead of trying to figure out what are the arguments on each side and how strong are they, and then how strong is the case for each side minus the criticism of that side, and then you figure out which side has a higher score or strength or weight. I think that approach is what everyone is trying to do. So their goal in debate is wrong. That approach does not work. The numbers are arbitrary, and you can't have conclusive debates when you just put a bunch of arguments out there and then everyone decides for themselves subjectively how many points each argument is worth. That is why you can't reach conclusions, because you're using all these arguments that people come up with their own scores for. And then their conclusion is based on their subjective scores, so it's not objective. Whereas with the CF approach, if you use decisive arguments that refute ideas for clearly specified goals, then it is much easier for people who are debating each other to get on the same page and reach a conclusion that they agree on. Like, if this criticism is true, then this idea will fail at this goal, is the kind of more specific objective thing that people can reach an agreement on. If this criticism is true, would it be indecisive? Would this idea still succeed at this goal or not? And to do this, you need to specify clear goals in addition to clear ideas. And then you need to evaluate a bunch of ideas for a bunch of goals. And you can make a big table with the ideas on the left for each row for an idea, and then each goal has a column, the goals go along the top. And then you can make a chart, and then in each square in the chart or spreadsheet, you can say pass or fail. If you do it this way, you should have a much easier time reaching actual agreement with a debate partner about whether any one individual square in this grid should have a pass or a fail written in it. So if the goal is to buy a house that costs under $300,000, and the idea is to buy this particular house over here, you should not have a hard time agreeing with your debate partner whether it's a pass or a fail. Does the house cost under $300,000 or not? When the goal and the idea are both that simple, and you have a clear success or failure criterion that's being specified, then you can actually agree with someone, a debating opponent, about the correct answer. So if you approach it more like this and use decisive arguments, it will make debates much more productive. It will be much more possible to actually reach agreed upon conclusions with the other person. And then there's a bunch more that you need to know to actually do this, like how do you deal with complex goals? And how do you deal with non-numerical goals? And I have a bunch of ideas about that, but I'm not going to go through them in this podcast. Another thing that's important is after debates, people often don't change their behavior much. And so CF again has ideas about how to deal with that related to practice and automation and mastery and how your subconscious works. And then you have to, the problem is people will debate and then they will be consciously persuaded, but what they need to do is teach or train or persuade their subconscious, or else it won't affect their behavior very much, because most of your behavior is decided by your subconscious. Most of your behavior is related to habits and policies. Your conscious mind does not have the attention or bandwidth to deal with everything in your life. Your subconscious mind has most of your mental resources. So again, not going to go into detail on that, but CF has some solutions there. The way people debate is often indecisive arguments for vague goals. So they'll have a goal like, I want a good house, and then they will debate their spouse about which house they should buy. But what is a good house? Because the goal is so undefined, when you make an argument like, we should get this one because it has a pool and pools are fun, like how many points is that worth? How strong of an argument is it? The goal does not give you clear criteria that tell you exactly what success is. So what you need to do is break that down into a lot of different sub-goals of individual specific success or failure criteria related to what might be a good house. And you break it down into all these little parts, not just the things you are like convinced that you want, but anything that you might want can be included on the list. Anything that might make a good house. And you get a list of too many things, and then you go through it after evaluating like which houses fit which criteria, and you can see like how many criteria are you going to be able to get and like which ones come together in groups. And then once you see what your options are, you'll be able to better decide on which criteria you're actually going to use as your final goal. And your final goal will basically just be anding together many criteria. You say, I want criteria A and C and D and F and Y and Z. You just combine a bunch of sub-goals like that, and then you get a complex goal, you know, a house with many good traits. So some sort of definition of a good house based on a bunch of small specific things. So one of the things I think is really wrong in the world is people became very pessimistic about debate. And debate is actually really important. It would make a lot of things a lot better. But there is not enough effort going into fixing that. I think people have way too much just actually given up. Not many people are trying to fix and solve this problem. And I partly understand that because I think without the decisive argument idea, it's never really going to work that well. So I understand in some way how it's too hard and it needs a fundamental mindset shift in order to make a breakthrough. However, what I found is after making that big breakthrough, because everyone already gave up, like no one wants to listen and people aren't very interested. So that is problematic. So I hope by repeatedly trying to explain more about it, I can get some more people interested.